Welcome to the Dialogues, Chapter 11, The Return to Unity and the End of Thought as You Know It. This chapter continues along the same vein as the previous chapter, but we're talking more about thought in this chapter. In fact, we're beginning with a very intriguing question. What is it that differentiates you from the Christ? The Christ being the embodied self of form, or the elevated self of form. And the answer is, you think. What? Don't we all think? Verse 2, you think it is only the content of your thoughts that differentiate you from others. Do you think the same is true of you and me? It is that you think that differentiates you from me, not our content, which is one and the same. So this is such an intriguing idea, and I love that he just comes out and says it. And of course, when I say he, I'm talking about the one who already knows this, and how that works we don't know, but we're just going to roll with it. So I look at the mind as having two functions, two different ways of operating. One of them is the practical mind, the part of the mind, the way that it functions, in that you can have a problem and find a solution. You can work out how to fix something, or how to cook something, or create something. That practical functioning mind. And then there's the thinking mind, and this is what Jesus is talking about here. That thinking mind is actually a programming that was put in place over years and years, and actually your conditioning, which is always being updated, by the way. It didn't just stop when you were 16. It's always being updated. But it's like a computer program that plays, and the input has been done, from all we can tell, at random. And we have thought that those thoughts are us, that they've been a reflection of who we are. And now we're discovering that, wait, no, that's just conditioning. It's like a computer program that plays over and over again. And most people have believed their thoughts were actually a reflection of themselves and were a big part of their identity, were sourced from themselves. And now we're discovering that that's not their source at all. The source is the programming that happened as we were living this apparent separate identity. In order to create the new, what must occur is a total rejection of thought as you know it. Now, this isn't a denial of thought. Nobody's going to go around saying, oh, there's nothing happening in my brain. This is just a rejection of it. In that, we recognize it's not true. It's just old programming that keeps running over and over and over again. Thoughts are the last bastion of the separated self. Your testimony that you still believe you're on your own. And certainly if you listen to your thoughts, they are telling you your separate self. You think your contributions to the world will come from this individualized self. You feel a calling, and your thoughts turn to how to solve this problem of how to contribute. So again, he's referring back to the idea that the calling comes from the larger self, and then we give the small self the assignment of making it happen, and it just thwarts the whole process. So we have to understand that that running commentary, that usually very abusive voice, is just a false product of old conditioning, and it's not true, and it's not us, and we just don't have to pay attention to it. Verse 6, if you reach a state of full acceptance of who you are, and in that state fully accept that your contribution is being made, will desire still be with you? I mean, that's a question. I know a lot of people think, if I just live in that peaceful state, is it going to be really boring? Am I just going to float around in la la land? But what he's talking about here is not inspiration, ideas, vision, creation, all of that that we have seen comes from the larger self. He's talking about that feeling within of the personal, individualized self that's always trying to fix itself, make it better, somehow make itself lovable, make itself good enough. Ooh, I've got to do this now, I've got to do that now. Or it's trying to cover up those feelings through withdrawing, numbing out, or distracting itself, all of our coping mechanisms. So that unfulfilled longing is what's going to disappear. But creation itself creates, expresses, and expands. So it's ongoing, and there's always something more to discover and explore. Verse 7, the way to achieve this state is through acceptance that it is already accomplished. Now, this is not about positive thinking, like, say it till you mean it kind of thing. This is a recognition that, wait, this small dot, which is representing the experience of form that I'm having, is contained within and is not separate from the large dot. So consciousness, wanted to have this individuated experience and willingly took on the limitations of a filter and a personality and form and that experience. And yet it is consciousness itself having the experience. It's not a small, dumbed down version. It's not a version that needs to be improved. It's a version that's contained within the larger version, and it's not separate from it. Why is this so hard to recognize? Why do you still seek your calling? Verse 10, these answers lie within you, at the heart of yourself, as do all answers. Your heart is the well of spirit from which true answers are drawn. Your heart is a full well, a wellspring from which you can continually draw with no danger of ever drawing an empty bucket. So what he's talking about here with the heart, it's like that's the part that connects to the larger circle. That's the part that is in unity with that one energy of all consciousness. And it never ends. You're never going to not have a connection. You're never not going to not have an expression, a feeling, an experience. It can't ever run dry. When you've accepted this, you will never thirst or seek again. So this whole driven thing that we've been having is to aggrandize or make acceptable the personal individualized self. When this recognition that, wait, I'm not this individualized self. I'm actually consciousness having the experience of being this individualized self. And I have access to all of consciousness, which is exciting, and I can explore and discover and find endless amounts of love and inspiration and ideas and creativity there. Then you don't have to try to aggrandize the individual self anymore. It doesn't make any sense. So let's move on. To not live from this belief is insane. Why would you want to be this oppressed, individualized, separate self that's never good enough? Ugh. What prevents your success is your thoughts. Thoughts that need an explanation for everything in terms of the world you've known. These concepts will never make sense in the world you've known, because the world you've known has been based on the false idea of separation. So there's a big tendency in spiritual circles, I think it's been called a spiritual ego, where when we first encounter the whole idea of spirituality, there's this feeling like, ooh, I'm going to take this information and I'm going to be able to enhance myself so that I'm a way better self finally. I've been trying to be a better self. And if I can apply these principles, then I'll be an elevated self. I'll be a higher self. But that's not what this is pointing to. This is telling you you're already a higher self. You are just operating from the idea that you're not. You've been confined to this false program that says you're separate and small, but you never ever have been. Verse 12 points to that. But for those willing to open their minds and hearts to a new way of seeing, for those willing to suspend disbelief, the answer to the giving and receiving of these words will provide the answer to the question your thoughts cannot quite comprehend well enough to articulate, much less to answer. So your thoughts can't go there, basically. But if you open your mind and heart and look to see, is it true? You investigate for yourself. Do I have access to that place in this moment through discovery? Try it out and see. Don't take my word for it. Find out. We are the Sacred Heart. We together are the shared consciousness of unity. There actually has never been any separation. There is only one thing going on. There is only one energy. And together that one energy is all that is. Verse 13. You do not think your way through life, but instead draw your knowing forth from the well of spirit, from the shared consciousness from which these words were given and received. And it's talking about that larger circle, which in fact has no boundaries. Verse 14. In other words, the elevated self of form does not remain contained within the dot of the body, but draws its sustenance from the larger circle, the circle of unity. So I'm still having this form experience. I still have information comes in from the five senses. I still have the appearance of being within this particular form, but that's not where I draw my sustenance. There's a continuous awareness of the fact that I'm actually all of consciousness choosing to have this experience. And here I am in this present moment showing up for what's here. And what about the contributions of each elevated self of form? They're surely not the same. I mean, I've done this and you've done that and he's done that, and we haven't done the same things in this world. But the answer, our contributions come from the wellspring of spirit, from shared consciousness, and find their unique expression through each elevated self of form. So imagine if you have this big consciousness of which we all are sourced and in which everything is contained. And that consciousness expresses differently through each individual filter, through each experience. And the filter, of course, was taken on as we voluntarily came into a world of limitations in order to have that experience. So yes, each individual filter, which consists of a body, mind, and programming and all of the other things that contribute to what your filter is, the light is the same. The light shining through each individual is the same. The energy in each individual and the intelligence of each individual and that sense of here I am, this is myself, same, all the same. The only thing that's different is that that light is shining through different filters. And all of that gets contributed back into the one so that we all share that knowledge and that energy. Verse 16, I tell you truthfully that the only contributions that endure, the only contributions that are truly lasting, are contributions that arise from the well of spirit. And what he's talking to here is whatever you think you've done as an individual self, whatever accomplishments, there's a reason why they haven't brought you satisfaction, right? Because they're on that limited level. Where the satisfaction lies is in keeping that relationship going, that relationship and unity to the larger consciousness while we're having this experience. There is no truth inherent in the individual separated self, but only illusion. Illusion can provide no place in which seeking ends and the truth is found. So that individual separated being that you thought you were your whole life, there is no truth to it. And there's only that endless seeking, and who wants that? So the suggestion is don't turn to your thoughts. Don't listen to your thoughts. Reject those thoughts. Understand what they are. They're just the record playing in the background. They're not true. They're not significant. Don't believe them. But turn to the mind and heart joined in unity, the place from which the expression and right-minded action of the elevated self of form arises. That's where it happens, where you know who you are and you can still express through form. That's the whole reason we're here. So we end with these recognitions. I know who I am. I'm an expression of consciousness experiencing the world of form. I know what I am. I am one with all that is. I know how I serve. I live in discovery, expressing and expanding right now from the wellspring of unity. This is the contribution. This is how we serve. By knowing who we are and living from that. Well, what a wonderful idea. And what a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to talk with you again in Chapter 12.